The chandeliers glittered like frozen stars above the grand ballroom of the Langston Hotel. The air smelled of champagne and betrayal. Grace Miller stood near the entrance, clutching the edge of her pale blue gown, her heart thudding in disbelief. This was supposed to be her husband's company anniversary gala, a night they had planned together for months. Yet somehow, she hadn't been invited, until a kind coworker whispered, "You should come. You deserve to see the truth for yourself." Her heels clicked against marble floors as she entered, 6 months pregnant and trembling. Every head turned, but not out of joy. Conversations halted, replaced by whispers slicing through the music. At the center of the stage, under a golden spotlight, stood Nathan Miller, her husband, looking every inch the triumphant millionaire. His arm wrapped possessively around a woman in a crimson silk gown. Grace blinked once, twice. The woman turned. It was Emily, her sister. Grace's world went silent. Her mind tried to reject what her eyes couldn't deny. Emily, the same sister who once held her hand through heartbreaks, now leaned in and kissed Nathan's cheek for the cameras. Reporters clapped. Nathan tapped the microphone and smiled. "Tonight," he announced, "I want to share something personal. Emily has shown me what real love means. I'm moving forward with her." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Grace staggered backward, a hand over her stomach. Someone whispered, "Isn't that his wife?" Another murmured, "And she's pregnant." The words spun like shards of glass in her head. Her vision blurred. Nathan's voice droned on about a future built on honesty. She almost laughed. Honesty? The man who once promised forever now flaunted her own blood as his new prize. Emily caught Grace's gaze across the room. For a brief moment, guilt flickered in her sister's eyes, then vanished. She tightened her grip on Nathan's hand. Grace's breath caught in her throat. Her knees buckled, but she refused to fall. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. She turned to leave, her heart pounding so violently she could feel it in her ears. But then a flashbulb burst, blinding her. Reporters swarmed, cameras clicking. "Mrs. Miller, how do you feel about your husband's engagement?" someone shouted. Grace froze. The world tilted. Her stomach twisted in pain, sharp, unbearable. Her hand went to her belly as warmth flooded down her leg. Gasps erupted. Someone screamed for help. Nathan turned, his expression flickering between annoyance and shock. For one suspended moment, their eyes met. She whispered through trembling lips, "You took everything from me, even family." Then her vision faded into white noise. The last thing she saw was Emily's face, half horror, half relief, as darkness closed in. And as Grace collapsed on the marble floor beneath the glittering lights, the cameras kept flashing, capturing the moment her entire world shattered. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and loneliness. A steady beeping filled the silence, each sound dragging Grace Miller further from the nightmare she wished were a dream. When she finally opened her eyes, white light blurred her vision. Her hands instinctively moved to her stomach. The gentle curve was still there, but smaller, weaker. Panic surged through her chest. "Where's my baby?" she croaked, voice raw. The nurse hesitated, glancing toward the door. "You need to rest, Mrs. Miller. The doctor will explain." "No, tell me where my baby is." Grace struggled to sit up, but the IV line tugged at her arm. The nurse finally whispered, "There were complications. I'm so sorry." Grace's world shattered again. Her mind screamed, but no sound came out. She curled on the bed, sobbing until her body went numb. Hours blurred into days. No visitors came, no calls, only silence and the mechanical heartbeat of the monitor beside her. 3 days later, a man in a gray suit arrived. Slick hair, polite smile, the kind that practiced sympathy without feeling it. "Mrs. Miller," he said softly, "I'm Mr. Grayson. I represent your husband." Grace froze. "My husband?" He nodded, sliding a folder across the table. "Mr. Nathan Miller asked me to deliver this. It's a legal separation notice. He's also covered your medical bills and arranged for your recovery at a private facility upstate. He believes distance will help you heal." She stared at the papers. Every word sliced through her like glass. "He believes I should disappear," she whispered. Mr. Grayson didn't answer. He only sighed, closing the folder. "Mrs. Miller, I shouldn't say this, but you should know the media has been harsh. They believe your emotional instability caused the incident. Mr. Miller's PR team has released a statement, purely to protect your reputation, of course." Grace's trembling hands reached for the TV remote. The hospital channel flickered to life. News anchors discussing the tragic breakdown of Nathan Miller's marriage. Her photo appeared on screen, pale, tired, taken at the gala before she fainted. The headline read, "Wife suffers breakdown, millionaire moves on with new fiancé." Her lungs locked. Fiancé? The screen shifted to a clip of Nathan and Emily hand in hand outside a charity event. Emily's belly was just slightly rounded. The reporter smiled. Sources say Emily Carter, Nathan's longtime family friend, is expecting their first child together. Grace felt something in her chest snap. Her sister, pretending to be the one expecting love, life, and legitimacy. It was all choreographed, the cameras, the timing, the story. Nathan hadn't just replaced her, he had rewritten her. That night, when the nurse thought she was sleeping, Grace pulled the IV from her arm. She moved silently through the hallway, one hand over her stomach, feeling the faintest flutter inside. There was still life. Faint, but there. She pressed her palm tighter and whispered, "Hold on, baby, we're not done yet." Outside, snow fell thick and heavy. Grace wrapped herself in a hospital blanket, slipping out through the side door. The cold bit through her skin, but she didn't care. Each step forward was an act of defiance. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay in a world where lies had buried her alive. Behind her, the news continued to spread, painting her as the unstable wife who lost her mind. But what no one knew was that Grace hadn't lost everything. Not yet. There was still one heartbeat that refused to give up. Snow fell like silent ashes on the edge of Portland, Maine. The small countryside clinic looked nothing like the sleek hospitals Grace had known in Boston. Its paint peeled, its windows fogged from the bitter cold. Yet inside those worn walls, Grace Miller, now calling herself Anna Morgan, breathed for the first time without fear. Dr. Samuel Hayes leaned against the doorframe, watching her try to stand. "Careful," he warned gently. "You've been through hell. Give yourself time." Grace braced her trembling hands on the metal railing. "I don't have time," she whispered. "I need to find work. I need to start over." Samuel studied her, the faintest shadow of concern behind his tired blue eyes. "You'll collapse before you get halfway to town. Sit." Reluctantly, she sank back into the chair. Her body was thin, her cheeks hollow, but her spirit glimmered with quiet defiance. The tabloids had declared her broken. Nathan and Emily's publicist had painted her as unstable. Yet here she was, alive, nameless, and breathing. "You're lucky you made it," Samuel said after a moment. "Hypothermia, blood loss, exhaustion. You shouldn't have survived the night you left the hospital." Grace smiled faintly. Maybe luck had nothing to do with it. Her hand drifted to her stomach. "Maybe I had a reason." Samuel's gaze softened. "Then you fight for that reason. But you can't do it alone. Let me help." Days melted into weeks. The clinic's rhythm became her new heartbeat, faint, steady, fragile. She worked quietly in the back, filing records, mopping floors, anything to pay her way. The nurses knew her only as Anna, the quiet woman who flinched at sudden noises and stared too long at the snow. One evening, as the wind howled outside, Samuel brought her a paper bag filled with groceries. Inside were prenatal vitamins, warm soup, and a small stuffed rabbit. "For the baby," he said. Grace blinked back tears. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." He paused. "You're not the first person to lose everything, Anna, but I've never seen anyone hold on this fiercely." That night, lying on the narrow cot, Grace listened to the storm hammering against the windows. Her thoughts wandered to Nathan, his sharp suits, his lies polished with charm. To Emily, her laugh, once innocent, now venom in Grace's veins. She replayed the moment at the gala, the blinding cameras, the betrayal, the humiliation. Then she felt it, a flutter, small but real, deep inside her belly. Her baby moved, tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're still here," she whispered. "We made it." Months passed. Spring crept into Maine, thawing the frozen ground. Grace began teaching piano at a local community center under her new name. Her students adored her gentle patience, unaware that their soft-spoken teacher once graced charity galas beside millionaires. But peace never lasts long in stories like hers. One morning, Samuel entered the clinic holding a newspaper from Boston. His expression was grim. "You might want to sit down," he said quietly. Grace unfolded the front page. There, smiling under perfect lighting, were Nathan and Emily, arm in arm. The headline read, "Miller announces new heir, couple expecting child." Her pulse quickened. New heir? Emily wasn't due yet. Grace's stomach tightened. She felt her own baby kick inside her, as if sensing the injustice. Samuel met her eyes. "You said you left everything behind," he murmured, "but it looks like your past is coming for you." In Boston, luxury had a sound, the whisper of silk gowns against marble floors, the clink of wine glasses, the low hum of gossip. Emily Carter had learned to love that sound. She stood before a mirror in the penthouse she now shared with Nathan Miller, admiring her reflection in a gold-framed glass taller than she was. Her diamond necklace caught the light as she smiled at the image looking back. The woman who had won. Nathan stepped behind her, his reflection towering over hers. "You look perfect," he said, his hands sliding over her shoulders. "You were made for this life, Emily." She smiled sweetly, but her eyes flicked to the briefcase sitting on the counter. Inside were legal documents, transfers, account closures, new ownership papers. "And what about the old life?" she asked carefully. "Grace's name is still on some of your accounts. Won't that be inconvenient?" Nathan's smile tightened. "Already handled. I signed the transfer this morning. My lawyer said we just need her final signature on one last paper." Emily's lips curved into something colder than satisfaction. "Leave that to me." That evening she called Grace's old number, her voice trembling with faint concern. "Grace? Oh my God, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Nathan didn't mean for any of this. He's confused." Grace sat in the dim light of her rented room in Maine, her phone pressed to her ear, heart pounding. "You stole my husband, Emily," she whispered. "I didn't steal him. You lost him," Emily replied softly, almost lovingly. "But listen, there's still one thing we can fix. Nathan wants to make sure you're financially supported. There's a document, just a formality. Sign it, and you'll never have to worry about money again." Grace hesitated. The word support echoed in her mind. Money, safety, maybe a chance to secure something for her unborn child. "Send it," she said quietly. The papers arrived 2 days later, couriered by a smiling man in a suit. The envelope bore Nathan's company seal. Grace's hands shook as she signed her name, Grace Miller, at the bottom of the last page. She didn't know that what she signed wasn't a support agreement. It was a full relinquishment of her marital assets, her shares, her rights, her future. In Boston, Emily watched the confirmation email arrive on Nathan's phone. Her pulse quickened. "She signed," she whispered. Nathan glanced up. "Good, now it's official." But Emily's ambition went further. She wanted more than Nathan's love. She wanted power. Late at night, she crept into his office, scanning documents, memorizing passwords. Nathan was wealthy, but not as wealthy as he pretended. Several of his accounts were leveraged, his investments risky. Emily saw opportunity in chaos. When the news broke that Nathan's company had landed a billion-dollar government contract, Emily made sure her name appeared on the ownership filings as co-director. Nathan didn't even notice until weeks later. "I just thought it looked better for the public," she explained sweetly, her hand resting on his arm. He laughed, kissing her forehead. "You're clever, Em." Clever didn't begin to describe her. By the time Nathan realized what she'd done, Emily already controlled half of his fortune, all under the guise of protecting their future family. And miles away, Grace held the same pen she'd used to sign her life away, unaware that her own sister had transformed her signature into a weapon. In a world built on lies, Emily wasn't just the other woman. She was becoming the new Mrs. Miller, one forged in deceit and greed. The storm that night was merciless. Rain battered the roof of the small Maine clinic, thunder shaking the fragile walls. Grace lay in bed, clutching her swollen stomach as waves of pain tore through her. She wasn't due for another month. Something was wrong. "Dr. Hayes," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Within seconds, Samuel burst into the room, his coat drenched from the storm. "It's too soon," he murmured, checking her pulse. "The stress, it's triggering early labor." Grace's hands trembled as another contraction ripped through her body. "Save the baby," she pleaded. "Please, just save the baby." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I'll do everything I can." He called the nurses, his tone sharp but calm. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating Grace's pale face. Sweat soaked her hair. She screamed, her voice lost beneath the thunder. Hours passed in agony, then silence. For a moment, the world stilled. Grace lay limp, her body shaking with exhaustion. Samuel stood over her, face pale, eyes heavy with sorrow. Where's my baby?" she whispered. He hesitated. "One of them didn't make it." Her breath caught. 1? Samuel nodded slowly. You were carrying twins. We tried, Grace, we really did. But one was too weak, the other is alive. Barely. The room spun. Twins? She hadn't even known. Tears streamed down her cheeks as Samuel placed a tiny fragile bundle in her arms. The baby's chest rose and fell with shallow, uneven breaths. He's strong, Samuel said softly. He wants to live. Grace clutched the child against her chest. Noah, she whispered. Your name is Noah. For 3 days she refused to sleep. She sang lullabies to him, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. But there was a shadow over the clinic, a strange unease that Samuel couldn't explain. He'd noticed unfamiliar men in suits lingering outside, claiming to be from an insurance agency. They asked too many questions about a patient who didn't exist on record. Anna Morgan. On the 4th morning, Samuel left to contact a friend who could help move Grace to a safer place. When he returned, the nursery was empty. The crib was overturned, the blanket gone, the baby's soft cries replaced by silence. Grace was sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth, eyes vacant. They took him, she whispered. Someone took my baby. Samuel's blood ran cold. Oh? She shook her head weakly. A nurse? I thought she was helping. She said Noah needed oxygen. She took him, and she never came back. He rushed to the records, but the name the woman had used didn't exist. The security cameras had been disabled by the storm. No trace. Nothing. The police searched for days, but no leads surfaced. Grace's grief turned into quiet madness. She barely spoke, barely ate. Samuel stayed by her side, refusing to let her vanish completely. 1 week later, a package arrived at the clinic. No return address. Inside was a small white blanket embroidered with blue thread. It smelled faintly of Grace's perfume. Beneath it was a single note, written in an elegant, familiar hand. You were never meant to be a mother, Grace. Some things belong to those who deserve them. No signature. But Grace knew that handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the note. It was Emily's. And at that moment, Grace realized her sister hadn't just stolen her husband, she had stolen her child. 6 months later, Boston gleamed under spring sunlight, the city alive with wealth and whispers. On the front page of the Boston Chronicle, a headline stretched across the glossy paper. Nathan Miller and Emily Carter welcomed their firstborn, a miracle baby boy. Grace stared at the photo in disbelief. She sat in a small cafe in Maine, the newspaper trembling in her hands. Emily's smile looked radiant, maternal, almost saintly. Nathan stood beside her, proud, his arm around her waist. In Emily's arms was a baby wrapped in a familiar white blanket, the same one that had vanished the night Noah was taken. The blue embroidery glinted faintly in the photo's corner. Grace's coffee cup slipped from her grasp and shattered on the floor. The world blurred. It couldn't be. But deep down her mother's heart knew. That was her son. Her Noah. Dr. Samuel Hayes found her an hour later, sitting motionless on a park bench, the newspaper crumpled beside her. Grace, he said softly. You need to breathe. She's raising him, Grace whispered. My sister is raising my child. Samuel hesitated. It's possible, but we need proof before you go to the police. Grace turned to him, her eyes no longer hollow but burning with purpose. Then we'll get proof. 2 weeks later, Grace boarded a bus back to Boston. Her heart raced as the skyline came into view. Her city, her memories, her ghosts. She'd become Anna Morgan now. Hair dyed dark chestnut, glasses perched on her nose, her once elegant hands calloused from work. No one would recognize her. She rented a small room above an old music shop in Back Bay and began teaching piano lessons again. It was her way back into society, quietly, invisibly. The children adored her. Their parents saw only a gentle teacher, not a woman haunted by loss. But every night, Grace watched from afar. She learned where Nathan and Emily lived, a glass mansion overlooking the Charles River. Paparazzi often camped outside, snapping photos of the perfect couple. Through those pictures, Grace followed her son's growth. His curls, his small hands, the way his eyes shone with a light she remembered from the ultrasound screen. Her heart broke anew each time. One evening, as she closed the shop, she noticed a sleek black car parked across the street. A man in a gray coat sat inside, pretending to read a newspaper. Grace's instincts prickled. She turned abruptly and walked the other way. The car followed. She ducked into a crowded bookstore, heart pounding. Through the glass, she saw him make a call. Someone was watching her. They know I'm alive, she thought. That night, Samuel called. Grace, I checked the clinic records, he said urgently. The nurse who took Noah? Her license was registered under a fake name, but the address listed, it's Nathan Miller's company headquarters. Grace gripped the phone. They did it, she whispered. They took him. Together. Grace, listen to me, Samuel said. If they find out you're alive, they'll destroy you. Stay hidden until we can expose them legally. But Grace had already made up her mind. She couldn't wait. She wouldn't. She stared out the window at the city lights flickering like 1,000 watching eyes. You once told me I was lucky to survive, she said quietly. But it wasn't luck, Samuel. It was unfinished business. As thunder rolled over the Charles, Grace packed a small bag. In the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Stronger, colder, alive. The world thought Grace Miller was dead. But that night, the ghost returned to Boston. And this time, she was ready to haunt the living. Emily Miller had everything she ever wanted, or so it appeared. Her life was a glossy magazine spread. Designer gowns, charity luncheons, photos of her smiling beside Nathan in front of flashing cameras. She had the mansion, the title, and the child she'd stolen. But beneath the layers of luxury, unease was beginning to rot the foundation of her new world. It started with the dreams. Every night, she saw Grace standing in the doorway of the nursery, face pale, eyes hollow, holding the same blue blanket Emily now used to swaddle her baby. In the dream, Grace didn't speak. She only stared, her lips trembling like she was about to cry until her eyes filled with blood. Then Emily would wake, gasping, drenched in cold sweat, clutching the child to her chest. Bad dream again? Nathan mumbled one morning, still half asleep. She nodded weakly. She was here again. Grace. Watching me. Nathan sighed. Emily, she's gone. The coroner confirmed it. Maybe you should stop reading those gossip forums. They'll drive you insane. But Emily couldn't shake it. There was no body, no proof. Grace had simply vanished. Later that day, while preparing for a charity interview, Emily caught sight of herself in the mirror. For a second, she swore she saw Grace's reflection instead. Same eyes, same quiet fury. She blinked, and it was gone. But her hands shook so badly she spilled coffee down her silk blouse. Nathan noticed her trembling and frowned. Are you sure you're okay? Maybe we should postpone the event. I'm fine, she snapped too quickly. Then softer, I just need rest. But rest wouldn't come, not when anonymous letters began arriving. The first one was slipped under the front door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Nathan and Emily at the gala months ago, the night everything began. On the back, written in neat cursive, were 4 words. She remembers everything now. Emily's heart pounded. She tore the photo to pieces, throwing it into the fireplace before Nathan could see. But 2 days later, another envelope appeared, this one containing a baby rattle, identical to the one Grace had bought months before the betrayal. By the 3rd letter, she was too frightened to sleep. Nathan grew irritated with her paranoia. You're imagining things, he said. If you keep acting unstable, people will start talking. People? Emily repeated, her voice trembling. You mean your investors, your precious image? He didn't respond. He just poured himself another drink. That night, Emily tiptoed into the nursery. The baby stirred softly in his crib, his tiny fist gripping the corner of the blue blanket. She brushed his hair back and whispered, You're mine. She can't have you. From outside the window, a figure watched, motionless, cloaked in shadow. Grace's breath fogged the glass as she looked at the son she once held for a single night. Her chest tightened, but she stayed silent. The moment wasn't right. Not yet. Downstairs, Emily suddenly felt the air grow colder. The nightlight flickered. A faint melody drifted through the baby monitor, a lullaby she hadn't sung. Her heart froze. It was Grace's song. She spun around, searching the dark corners of the room. Who's there? Silence. Only the soft hum of the monitor. But when she looked back at the crib, the blanket had fallen to the floor. Emily backed away, trembling, clutching her child. And outside, Grace whispered to the wind, You stole my life, Emily. Now I'll take back what's mine. Boston's Beacon Hill was a fortress of privilege, tall brick homes, iron gates, and secrets sealed beneath layers of money. When Grace returned under her alias, Anna Morgan, she knew she couldn't confront Nathan and Emily alone. She needed information, evidence, and time. What she didn't know was that fate was about to hand her an unexpected weapon. It started on a rainy morning. Grace was opening the small piano studio she'd built above a bookstore when a woman appeared at the doorway, mid-30s, trench coat dripping, hair clinging to her face. "You teach music?" she asked, her tone urgent. Grace nodded, cautious. "Mostly children. Are you looking for lessons?" The woman smiled faintly. "Not exactly. I'm looking for a story." She reached into her bag and pulled out a press badge. "Claire Dawson, investigative journalist, The Boston Chronicle." Grace froze. "I'm sorry, you've mistaken me for someone else." Claire tilted her head. "I don't think so, Mrs. Miller." The name hit like a bullet. Grace's pulse quickened. "That name doesn't belong to me anymore." Claire's expression softened. "I've been following your case since the gala. I never believed what they said, that you had a breakdown, that you lost your mind. The evidence didn't add up." Grace's first instinct was to run. But something in Claire's eyes, steady, kind, and quietly furious, stopped her. "Why would you care?" Grace whispered. "Because I lost my job for publishing a story about Nathan's company 2 years ago," Claire said. "He buried me in lawsuits. But recently I found something. Financial discrepancies, deleted hospital records, and a nurse who disappeared the same week your baby did." She slid a small flash drive across the piano lid. "You might want to see this." Grace's hands trembled as she plugged it into her old laptop. Photos appeared. Hospital files, signatures, and a grainy still from a security camera. There, blurred but unmistakable, was Emily walking through the maternity ward in a nurse's uniform, carrying a bundled infant. Grace's breath caught. "That's him. That's Noah." Claire nodded. "Emily forged transfer papers under a fake medical ID. Your baby didn't die, Grace. He was taken." Tears welled in Grace's eyes, but her grief turned quickly to steel. "Then we exposed them." "Not yet," Claire said sharply. "They're powerful. You go public without proof, and they'll destroy you again. We need to build a case, slowly, quietly." For the next month they worked in secret. Claire dug through financial records. Grace gathered evidence from Nathan's old business contacts. She found out Emily had gained control of half of Miller Tech through documents bearing Grace's forged signature. One evening, as they sat surrounded by papers and photographs, Grace asked quietly, "Why are you really helping me, Claire?" The journalist smiled sadly. "Because women like us don't get justice handed to us. We take it back." Outside, thunder rolled again over Boston. Across the city, Emily and Nathan were hosting another lavish fundraiser, smiling for cameras, their sins hidden under designer smiles. But that same night, Grace sent an anonymous envelope to a board member of Miller Tech. Inside was a single photograph, Emily in the hospital hallway, holding a baby she had no right to claim. As the clock struck midnight, Grace looked out her window toward the glittering skyline. "You wanted a ghost," she murmured. "Now you've got one." And far below, in the dark heart of the city, the first cracks began to form in Nathan and Emily's perfect empire, placed there by the woman they thought was gone forever. The first snow of winter dusted the narrow streets of Beacon Hill, coating the city in quiet white. Inside her small apartment above the piano shop, Grace sat beside the fire, her breath coming in shallow waves. The contractions had started hours ago, steady and relentless. There was no hospital this time, no sterile lights, no doctors whispering about complications. Only Dr. Samuel Hayes, her only friend, standing over her with steady hands and eyes full of concern. "You're doing great," he said softly. "Just a little longer, Grace." "I can't," she gasped, gripping the blanket. "Not again. I can't lose another one." "You won't," Samuel promised. "He's strong. So are you." The storm raged outside, wind howling against the old windows. Grace's world narrowed to pain and memory, the blinding lights of the gala, the betrayal, Emily's smirk, the note that stole her sanity. Every scream was an exorcism of the life she'd lost. And then, through the agony, came a small, sharp cry, raw, fragile, alive. Samuel smiled. "You did it." Grace collapsed back against the pillow, tears mixing with sweat. The doctor handed her the baby, wrapped in a clean towel. The moment her arms closed around him, the world stilled. The child blinked up at her, eyes a deep, stormy gray, the same as Nathan's. Her heart clenched. "Noah," she whispered, "you came back to me." For a long time she simply held him, her tears falling onto his tiny hands. Samuel watched quietly, his throat tight. "You know what this means," he said. "They'll never stop looking if they find out." "I won't let them," Grace said fiercely. "No one will take him from me again." Days turned into weeks. Grace registered Noah under her alias, Anna Morgan, and Samuel falsified the birth certificate to protect her. But as she watched the baby grow stronger, something gnawed at her peace. His eyes, his expression, the way his tiny fingers curled when he slept. It was like seeing Nathan's ghost. Samuel noticed too. "He looks familiar," he murmured one afternoon. Grace turned away. "Don't say it." But he did. "You need to know, Grace, for your own safety." He took a DNA swab when she wasn't looking, part doctor's instinct, part dread. Weeks later, the results arrived in a plain envelope. He stared at the numbers in disbelief, his heart pounding. The child wasn't just Nathan's son. The DNA pattern showed something deeper, almost impossible. 2 samples in the system matched Noah's genetic code. One belonged to Nathan Miller, the other belonged to Emily Carter. He reread the file 3 times. Twins. The missing baby Grace thought had died, could still be alive, raised as Emily's own. That night, Samuel went to Grace's apartment. She sat by the fire, rocking Noah to sleep, humming a soft tune. When she saw his face, her smile faltered. "What is it?" "Grace," he said quietly, "there's something I need to show you." He handed her the report. Her eyes scanned the page, confusion turning to horror. "This can't be right," she whispered. "Emily's child isn't hers," Samuel finished. "He's yours. Your twins were never lost, Grace. They were divided." Grace's vision blurred as tears burned her eyes. "She stole my son and my daughter." The room fell silent except for the crackling fire. Grace pressed Noah close to her heart. The truth was too monstrous to comprehend, yet it fit every missing piece. Emily's baby, her miracle child, the one flaunted on magazine covers, was Grace's flesh and blood. And in that moment, Grace vowed that no matter the cost, she would bring her children back together, even if it meant destroying the world Nathan and Emily had built. In the marble halls of Miller Tech's headquarters, the world believed Nathan and Emily Miller were untouchable. They were the city's golden couple, the visionary CEO and his glamorous wife gracing magazine covers, smiling for cameras, hosting galas that cost more than most homes. But beneath the glimmer of perfection, cracks were beginning to show. Emily hadn't slept in days. The anonymous letters had stopped, but the silence was worse. It felt like the pause before a storm. And lately, Nathan had grown distant, his temper short, his eyes filled with suspicion. One evening, as Emily walked into his office, she saw him on a call, voice low and sharp. "I don't care what it costs," he hissed. "I want another test. I want to be absolutely sure." Emily froze at the doorway. "Another test?" When he hung up, she forced a smile. "Everything okay?" Nathan looked up, startled. "It's nothing. Business." But his hand trembled slightly as he poured himself a drink. But she noticed a small envelope on his desk, stamped with the name Hayes Medical Laboratory. A chill crawled up her spine. That night, when Nathan fell asleep, Emily slipped into his study. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a DNA report. The words blurred through her tears as she read the results. Probability of paternity, 0%. Her heart stopped. The test claimed that Nathan was not the biological father of the baby she called her own. The baby she'd stolen. She staggered back, gripping the desk for balance. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." But it wasn't. She knew what she'd done, how she'd arranged for Grace's newborn to be switched during those chaotic hours at the clinic. She thought she covered every trace. So how could the results be wrong? Unless someone had tampered with them. The next morning, Nathan confronted her. "Who's the father, Emily?" His voice was low, dangerous. Her breath hitched. "Nathan, I swear. Don't lie to me." He slammed the paper onto the table. "Do you know what this does to me? To my company?" Tears streamed down her face, but behind them burned panic. Someone was manipulating the truth. Someone wanted to destroy her. That someone was Grace. Through Samuel's connections, Grace had learned that Nathan was planning a private DNA test. She'd bribed a lab technician to swap the results before Nathan ever saw them. The false report was bait, a trap meant to turn Nathan and Emily against each other. And it worked. Within days, the tabloids were buzzing with rumors of tension between the Millers. Emily stopped attending public events. Nathan moved into the guest wing of their mansion. The gossip pages speculated about infidelity, secret affairs, and hidden children. From her small apartment, Grace watched it unfold on TV. She didn't smile. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was heavy, slow, and cold. But necessary. "Are you sure you want to keep going?" Samuel asked. If they fall, they'll drag you down too. Grace stared at the flickering screen. They took my children, Samuel. I'll burn the world before I let them win. Meanwhile, Nathan ordered a second test, this time through a private investigator. Emily, desperate, intercepted the courier and replaced the samples again. But this time she made a fatal mistake. She mixed up the vials. A week later, Nathan received the results. They confirmed that his DNA matched not with Emily's child, but with another baby entirely, one registered under the name Noah Morgan. Nathan's hand trembled as he read it. "Who is Noah Morgan?" he whispered. And just like that, the trap snapped shut. Because now the man who had betrayed Grace was about to discover that the child he abandoned was truly his own. The morning Nathan Miller's empire began to crumble, Boston woke to the sound of breaking news. The stock ticker for Miller Tech flashed red across every financial screen. SEC investigates Miller Holdings for fraud and embezzlement. In his glass office overlooking the skyline, Nathan gripped the edge of his desk as reporters swarmed the street below. His assistant's voice quivered through the intercom. "Sir, the board wants an emergency meeting in 30 minutes. Nathan didn't answer. His hands were shaking, his pulse pounding behind his eyes. He'd built his fortune on control, on always being the smartest man in the room. Now it felt like someone had pulled the floor from under him. Emily burst into the office, her designer heels clicking like gunshots. "Nathan, what's happening?" He turned, jaw tight. "Someone's leaking internal documents, contracts, bank transfers, even private emails. The SEC thinks I falsified numbers on 3 government bids." Emily's voice cracked. "That's ridiculous. You'd never." "Wouldn't I?" he snapped, then sighed. "It doesn't matter. Once the press gets hold of this, it's over." Emily stepped closer, her fear masked by anger. "We can fix it. Hire lawyers, pay off whoever's talking. We've done it before." Nathan's expression hardened. "Not this time. Whoever did this knows too much." That afternoon, the board meeting turned into an execution. 12 men and women sat across the table, their eyes cold. "Mr. Miller," the chairman said, "the evidence is overwhelming. Offshore accounts, falsified signatures, unreported assets tied to your wife's name." Nathan blinked. "My wife's name?" "Yes," the chairman said, sliding a folder across the table. "Emily Miller, co-director of Miller Tech. Half the transfers were signed by her." Nathan's stomach dropped. He opened the folder, and there it was. Emily's signature, repeated across dozens of illegal documents. When he confronted her later that night, Emily stood at the top of the marble staircase, her baby in her arms. "You think I did this?" she scoffed. "Your name is on the files, Emily. Millions in transfers to unregistered accounts." Her face paled. "I didn't, Nathan, I swear. I didn't touch those papers." "Then who did?" he shouted. "You're the only one with access?" She froze, her mind racing. Grace, could it be? Meanwhile, across town, that Grace watched the news unfold from the dim light of her apartment. Miller Tech in crisis. Board votes to suspend CEO. A quiet satisfaction pulsed through her chest, but so did guilt. She hadn't caused the fraud, but her plan to expose them had set the dominoes falling. Samuel entered the room, holding a manila envelope. "You need to see this," he said. Inside were copies of the leaked files, the same ones destroying Nathan's career. "Where did these come from?" she asked. "An anonymous email," Samuel said. "But look at the metadata." Grace scanned the code, her breath catching. The documents had been sent from a computer inside Miller Tech's own penthouse office. "Emily's. She's trying to save herself," Grace whispered, throwing Nathan to the wolves. By midnight, Nathan's name was trending across every platform. Investors pulled out, clients vanished, and federal agents circled like vultures. Emily tried to call him, but he ignored every ring. He sat alone in the dark, whiskey glass trembling in his hand, the city lights blurring into a sea of gold and guilt. For the first time in his life, he realized he was no longer the hunter. He was the prey. And somewhere out there, the woman he'd betrayed was watching, waiting for the moment his empire would finally collapse. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside Grace's chest. Wind rattled the old windows of her apartment, thunder rolled above, and the sound of Noah's breathing, soft, rhythmic, was the only thing grounding her to reality. She sat at the kitchen table, exhaustion written across her face. She thought she had seen every cruelty fate could offer. She was wrong. A knock broke through the storm. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Grace froze, heart hammering. It was nearly midnight. She hesitated, then opened the door a crack. No one was there. Only a white envelope on the floor, the rain beginning to soak it through. Her name wasn't written on it, but on the back, in elegant handwriting, were 4 haunting words: "Your daughter is alive." The world tilted. Her hands trembled as she shut the door and tore the envelope open. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, slightly faded. A small girl, maybe 7 months old, wrapped in a familiar pink blanket embroidered with tiny gold stars. The same blanket Grace had bought before everything fell apart. She gasped, pressing the photo to her chest. "My baby," she whispered. Samuel arrived minutes later, having heard her panic over the phone. When he saw the photo, his expression darkened. "Where did this come from?" "The door," Grace said. "Someone left it there?" He studied it closely. The child's healthy, clean clothes, well-fed. Whoever sent this wanted you to know she's safe. Grace wiped her tears. "Safe? She's being raised by the people who destroyed my life." She turned to the window, her reflection fractured in the glass. "I have to get her back." Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Grace, think carefully. If you go after them now, they'll bury you. We need proof: birth certificates, DNA, custody records." She shook her head violently. "I can't wait for proof. She's mine." Samuel hesitated, then sighed. "If you're going to do this, you'll need help. And there's one person who might still owe me a favor." The next morning, Grace met a man named Julian Vega, a retired private investigator with a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He listened to her story in silence, then nodded slowly. "I've seen worse. You want the truth? I'll find it." Within days, Julian returned with photographs. Emily and Nathan at a private family estate in the Berkshires. Emily pushing a stroller. Inside it, Grace's daughter. "She calls her Lila," Julian said. "No one outside the household knows she isn't theirs. Birth records list Emily as the mother." Grace's knees buckled. "She took everything," she whispered. "My husband, my name, my children." Julian handed her another photo. Emily and Nathan arguing on the front steps. Emily's face twisted with rage, Nathan's with confusion. "The marriage is cracking," Julian said. "You may not have to fight alone much longer." That night, Grace stood by Noah's crib, brushing a hand through his curls. "You have a sister," she murmured, "and I'll bring her home. I promise." Across the city, Emily paced her bedroom. The same photo of the little girl lying on her dresser. She didn't know who sent it either. But the message beneath it chilled her blood. "You can't keep her forever." Emily looked out the window, sensing eyes in the darkness. And in that moment, both sisters realized the same secret was tearing them apart. But someone else was pulling the strings. Someone who knew the whole truth and wasn't finished yet. The wind screamed across the Charles River as Grace's car crept up the winding driveway toward the Miller's mansion. Headlights cut through the darkness, glinting off the iron gates that once symbolized power and now felt like prison bars. Inside, her pulse thundered. This was it. Months of silence, grief, and anger had led to this night. She was done hiding. Samuel's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't go alone. Wait for me." But she couldn't wait. The photograph of her daughter burned in her pocket like a heartbeat. She parked behind the line of hedges, slipped out, and climbed over the gate. The snow was deep, muffling her footsteps. The mansion glowed with soft yellow light. She could see shadows moving inside. Emily's silhouette, pacing by the window, a glass of wine in her hand. Grace's breath clouded in the air. Every step closer made her chest tighten with fury and fear. She didn't have a plan, just a mother's instinct and a heart full of fire. Inside, Emily turned as the door creaked open. At first she thought it was the wind. Then she saw her. Grace. The name fell from Emily's lips like a ghost escaping. Her glass slipped from her hand, shattering across the floor. Grace stood in the doorway, drenched in snow, eyes burning. "Hello, sister?" Emily stumbled backward. "You're supposed to be dead. Maybe you should have made sure." They stared at each other, two halves of the same tragedy. For a moment, neither spoke. The ticking of the grandfather clock filled the silence. Emily's voice trembled. "You shouldn't be here. Nathan will be home any minute." "I don't care," Grace interrupted. "Where's my daughter?" Emily's jaw tightened. "She's my daughter now. You forfeited that right when you walked away." Grace stepped closer, her voice low and shaking. "You stole her, Emily. You stole everything." Emily's composure cracked. "You think you were the only one suffering? I lived in your shadow my entire life. You had the husband, the respect, the perfect image. And me? I was invisible. Grace's laugh was hollow. So you destroyed me? Is that how you finally felt seen? Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. You don't understand. Nathan was never yours. He came to me first, years before you married him. You just got lucky. The words hit like a blade. Grace's world tilted, fury boiling to the surface. You're lying. Emily smirked through her tears. Ask him. Before Grace could respond, a cry echoed from upstairs. A baby's cry. Grace's heart lurched. Without thinking, she ran toward the staircase. Grace! Don't! Emily shouted, chasing after her. At the top landing, Grace spotted the nursery door slightly ajar. She pushed it open and froze. Inside the crib, a little girl slept peacefully beneath a pink blanket embroidered with gold stars. Grace's hand shook as she reached out, her fingertips grazing the fabric. Behind her, Emily screamed, "Don't touch her!" and lunged. The two women collided, the force knocking a lamp to the floor. Glass shattered, flames leapt from the fallen candlewick to the rug. They struggled, screaming, years of betrayal bursting out in raw chaos. Emily shoved Grace backward, but slipped on the glass. Her heel caught the edge of the stairway. For a moment, time froze. The two sisters locked eyes, one in shock, the other in horror. Then Emily fell. The crash echoed through the mansion. Grace staggered down the steps, trembling. Emily lay motionless at the bottom, blood blooming beneath her head like a dark halo. From the nursery, the baby's wail pierced the silence. Grace looked up the staircase, tears streaming. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And as sirens wailed in the distance, Grace realized that in taking back her child, she might have just destroyed what was left of her soul. The echo of the fall never left Grace's ears. For days after that night, it replayed endlessly. The scream, the thud, the silence. Emily had survived, but barely. When the police burst into the mansion, Grace was still standing beside the crib, her hands shaking, her dress stained with soot from the fire that had nearly consumed the nursery. The officers shouted commands she barely heard. They pulled her away from the baby, cuffed her wrists, and read her rights. Grace didn't resist. She couldn't. Her body felt hollow, her heart already broken. Now, weeks later, she sat in a courtroom that smelled of paper and perfume, her wrists wrapped in cold metal, the world watching. The media had turned her into a monster. Jealous ex-wife attacks sister, attempts kidnapping. Cameras flashed every time she moved. Across the aisle, Nathan sat beside Emily, who wore a neck brace and bandages along her face. The sight twisted Grace's stomach. Her once perfect sister now looked fragile, pitiful, yet her eyes still gleamed with venom. When the judge entered, the whispers ceased. This court will now hear the case of Grace Miller, charged with assault, breaking and entering, and attempted child abduction, the clerk announced. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, this is a clear case of obsession. The defendant, unable to accept her husband's new marriage, broke into their home with intent to harm. Grace's lawyer, a weary public defender named Mr. Carver, rose shakily. Your Honor, my client's actions were driven by desperation, not malice. She believed her child, presumed dead, was alive and being kept from her. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Grace lowered her gaze. Then the door opened and Nathan took the stand. He looked thinner, older. His voice was steady, but there was a tremor underneath. Grace has always been emotional. After the miscarriage, she became unstable. We did everything we could to help her. Grace's head snapped up. You're lying, she shouted before Carver pulled her back. Nathan avoided her eyes. When she showed up that night, Emily was terrified. She pushed past security, screaming about a stolen child. We tried to calm her, but she attacked Emily. The fall was an accident, yes, but Grace caused it. Grace's chest constricted. She wanted to scream that the baby upstairs was hers, that Emily had stolen everything. But without proof, her words meant nothing. Then Emily was called to testify. She limped to the stand, a picture of frail victimhood. The courtroom held its breath as she spoke in a soft, trembling voice. Grace was my sister. I loved her. I never wanted any of this, but she wouldn't let go of the past. I woke up and saw her standing over my baby's crib. I thought she was going to hurt him. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Perfect, rehearsed tears. The jury shifted uneasily. Grace's lawyer whispered, "Don't react. Let me handle it." But she couldn't stay silent. "You're lying, Emily," she cried. "That baby is mine. You stole her from me." Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order. Mrs. Miller, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." Grace sank back into her chair, trembling. The walls seemed to close in. Every eye judged her. Every whisper condemned her. Across the room, Emily pressed her bandaged hand to her chest, feigning heartbreak. Nathan reached over, squeezing her fingers. That image, his hand on Emily's, burned itself into Grace's mind. And as the gavel struck again, declaring a recess, Grace realized she wasn't just losing her freedom, she was losing her truth. The real fight hadn't even begun. The courtroom emptied slowly after the recess, reporters buzzing like flies. Grace sat alone at the defense table, wrists resting on cold wood, her thoughts a blur of panic and disbelief. How could the truth sound so false? How could lies look so perfect when spoken by the people she once called family? Her lawyer, Mr. Carver, rubbed his temples. Grace, we're outnumbered. Without concrete proof, the jury's going to believe their story. Grace shook her head weakly. There is proof. There has to be. Emily forged everything. My signature, my child's papers, the hospital records. Carver sighed. We've looked everywhere. The hospital system's been wiped clean. It's like someone deleted every trace of you. Grace's mind reeled. Samuel. Maybe Samuel still has something. Before Carver could respond, a voice called from the doorway. Or maybe I do. Both turned. Standing there was Claire Dawson, the journalist who had helped Grace months earlier, her trench coat damp from the rain, her eyes fierce. She held up a small silver flash drive. Grace's heart skipped. Claire? What is that? Everything, Claire said simply. Hospital security footage, lab transfers, even the nurse's fake credentials. The problem is, the files are encrypted. I can't open them. Mr. Carver frowned. Where did you get it? Claire hesitated. An anonymous drop-off, left in my mailbox this morning. No note. Just this. Grace felt the faintest glimmer of hope. Someone wants the truth out. Maybe, Claire said. Or maybe someone wants to watch you burn when you try. The judge's gavel signaled the trial's continuation, but Grace's mind was already elsewhere. She needed that drive decrypted, and she knew only one man who could do it. That night, after being escorted back to the detention center, she requested one phone call. When Samuel answered, her voice trembled. I need you to get this to someone. Fast. By morning, Samuel was already on it. He took the flash drive to an old college friend, an IT specialist who owed him favors. For hours, the man worked, his fingers flying over the keyboard until finally, a single folder opened. Samuel's stomach turned. Inside were dozens of videos, hospital surveillance footage, time-stamped the night Grace gave birth. One clip showed Emily entering the maternity ward in disguise. Another showed her leaving hours later, cradling an infant wrapped in a pink blanket. There was more. Audio recordings, signed documents, even Nathan's name listed under restricted patient access. Samuel burned the files onto a new drive and headed straight to the courthouse. Inside, the prosecution was finishing its argument. The jury looked convinced. The judge looked ready to rule. Grace sat still, her pulse barely steady, when the doors burst open. Samuel strode in, rainwater dripping from his coat. Your Honor, he said breathlessly, I have new evidence that changes everything. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Nathan's face went pale. Emily's fingers gripped the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. The judge frowned. Mr. Hayes, you are not part of this case. Then make me part of it, Samuel interrupted. Because this, he held up the flash drive, proves that Grace Miller isn't the criminal. She's the victim. Emily's mask cracked for the first time. That's a lie, she screamed. He's lying. But the panic in her voice was louder than her denial. Grace met her sister's eyes for the first time in weeks. For the first time, Emily looked afraid. And as the judge ordered the drive to be entered into evidence, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Because sometimes salvation doesn't come from saints. It comes from ghosts who refuse to stay buried. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft hum of the overhead lights. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the projection screen, where Dr. Samuel Hayes stood ready to present the evidence that could shatter the lies once and for all. Grace's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the judge's voice authorizing the display of new evidence. Dr. Hayes, the judge said, you may proceed. Samuel nodded, his face pale but resolute. Your Honor, these files come directly from the hospital where Mrs. Grace Miller, then under the alias Anna Morgan, was admitted the night of her childbirth. The footage you're about to see was hidden in the hospital's deleted archives. It has since been verified for authenticity. The lights dimmed. The video flickered to life. On screen, the grainy black and white security footage showed a hospital corridor. A figure appeared, Emily Carter, wearing scrubs, her face partially covered by a mask. She looked over her shoulder before slipping into the maternity ward. Minutes later, she exited carrying a small bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. Gasps filled the room. Nathan's jaw clenched. Emily's face went white. Samuel continued, "Your Honor, that baby was registered under Emily Carter's name hours later. But DNA results tell a different story." He lifted a sealed envelope. "The court has already authorized this test. Both children, one raised by Grace under the name Noah and the other raised by Emily as Lila, share a 99.98% genetic match as siblings, twins. And the biological parents," he paused, letting the words hang like a thunderclap, "are Grace Miller and Nathan Miller." A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. Nathan's hand gripped the edge of the table. "That's impossible," he muttered. Samuel looked directly at him. "It's not. You can read the results yourself." The judge motioned for the bailiff to hand the papers to Nathan. He unfolded them with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the lines and his expression broke, something between disbelief and shame. Grace sat frozen. After all the pain, the accusations, the betrayal, this was the truth she had begged for. Her children were alive, her blood, her proof. Emily's voice shattered the silence. "It's not true," she screamed, standing abruptly. "This is a setup, that footage, it's fake. You all want to ruin me." The judge raised his gavel. "Mrs. Miller, control yourself." Emily's hands shook violently. "You don't understand. He was mine. Everything was supposed to be mine." Her voice cracked, desperation spilling out. "I did what I had to do. She didn't deserve them." The courtroom gasped. Even the prosecutor leaned back, stunned. Nathan stood slowly, staring at her with hollow eyes. "You took my children, and you lied to me." Emily turned toward him, her voice softening. "I did it for us, Nathan. I wanted to protect what we had." "There was never an us," he said coldly. "Just the ruins you built." The judge cleared his throat, bringing the room back under control. "The evidence is clear. The custody of both children will be re-evaluated immediately. Mrs. Grace Miller, pending review, is to be released under supervision." Tears streamed down Grace's face as she covered her mouth. Freedom, her children, the truth, all of it, finally within reach. As the bailiff removed her handcuffs, she looked at Samuel. "You did it," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "No, you did. You survived long enough to fight back." But across the courtroom, Emily's expression shifted from horror to something darker. Her lips curled into a trembling smile, the smile of someone with nothing left to lose. And as Grace stepped into the cold sunlight outside the courthouse, she didn't realize the war wasn't over, because Emily Carter had just decided to burn everything that remained. The hospital room was dim, the only light coming from the faint glow of the heart monitor beside the bed. Emily Carter lay motionless, her skin pale against the white sheets, her arm wrapped in bandages. The sedatives kept her quiet for weeks after her courtroom outburst. The world believed she was broken, but the truth was far more dangerous. She was waking up. A nurse entered quietly, checking her IV. Emily's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded her expression. Then, as the nurse adjusted her blanket, a whisper escaped her lips. "Noah, Lila." The nurse froze. "Mrs. Miller, did you say something?" Emily's eyes widened, memories flooding back in flashes. The hospital, Grace's screams, the baby swap, the look on Nathan's face when he realized. A shiver crawled down her spine. "Where is my husband?" she asked softly. The nurse hesitated. "He hasn't been here." Of course he hadn't. Nathan was too busy saving his empire and reputation. Emily turned her head toward the window, the city skyline glowing in the distance. For years she had fought to build this life, to prove she was more than Grace's jealous little sister. Now, everything she had stolen was slipping through her fingers. Days passed. Reporters camped outside the hospital, hungry for updates. The fallen socialite, they called her. The jealous sister who stole her sibling's life. Every headline cut deeper than the last. But Emily didn't break. She waited, she listened, and slowly she remembered everything. One night a figure entered her room. Nathan. His once polished appearance was gone, his face haggard, his voice low. "Emily," he said, "we need to talk." She smiled faintly, though her lips trembled. "About what? The children you tried to erase, or the wife you tried to destroy?" He flinched. "You lied to me. You took Grace's baby." She laughed bitterly. "And you took everything from her long before I did. Don't act like you're the victim now." Nathan's voice cracked. "I loved you, Emily, but I can't fix what you've done." Emily's eyes filled with tears, not of regret, but of fury. "You don't get to walk away. Not after this." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I made you. Without me, you're nothing." He turned to leave. "Then I guess I'll be nothing." When the door closed, Emily's calm shattered. Her hand trembled as she reached for the phone. "Get me my lawyer," she hissed, "and send a message to the press. I'm ready to tell my side." That night, the city's biggest network received an anonymous tip, an exclusive interview offer from Emily Miller. But the story she planned to tell wasn't about guilt. It was about revenge. Across town, Grace sat in her apartment, rocking Noah as he slept. Samuel entered quietly. "She's awake," he said grimly, "and she's talking." Grace's stomach twisted. "About what?" "Everything," he replied. "And she's not taking the fall alone." Grace looked down at her son, fear creeping in where relief had once been. "She's coming for us, isn't she?" Samuel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Emily stared at her reflection in the window. Her eyes were sharper now, colder. "You think you've won, Grace," she whispered, "but you've only taken what's mine, and I always take it back." Outside, rain streaked down the glass, blurring the city lights into a smear of gold and gray. Because in Emily's world, redemption was a fantasy, and revenge was the only thing worth living for. The morning Nathan Miller lost everything. The sky over Boston was gray and merciless. Outside his penthouse, flashing lights from news vans painted the windows red and blue. The once celebrated CEO of Miller Tech was now the headline of every scandal. Nathan Miller charged with fraud and conspiracy. Empire collapses overnight. He stood by the glass wall, staring at the city he used to own. His reflection looked like a stranger, unshaven, eyes hollow, suit wrinkled. Behind him, the sound of boxes being packed echoed through the empty apartment. The housekeeper avoided his gaze. Even the walls seemed to echo betrayal. His phone buzzed. It was his attorney. "Nathan," the man said grimly, "the board voted. You're officially removed as CEO. The government seized your accounts. The mansion and cars, gone. There's nothing left." Nathan didn't answer. He simply hung up and poured himself another drink. The empire he'd built on charm, lies, and power was gone, crumbled under the weight of greed and deceit. The door opened behind him. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Hello, Nathan," Grace's voice said softly. He froze. Slowly he turned. She stood in the doorway, dressed simply in black, her eyes calm but unreadable. She wasn't the broken woman he'd last seen in that courtroom. There was strength in her now, a quiet fire that made him feel smaller than ever. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "I needed to see it," she said. "I needed to see what it looks like when karma finally comes home." Nathan gave a bitter laugh. "So you came to enjoy the show?" "No," Grace replied. "I came to end it." She walked to the window beside him. "You took everything from me. My name, my peace, my family. But I don't hate you anymore, Nathan. I pity you." He looked at her, eyes glassy. "You think I wanted any of this? You think I planned to destroy you?" "You didn't have to plan it," she said coldly. "You just had to be who you are." He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "Emily's gone. She disappeared last night, took the baby and vanished. The police can't find her." Grace's breath hitched. "She has Lila?" He nodded, defeated. "And she blames me for everything." Grace turned toward him, anger flaring again. "You let her steal my children, Nathan. You let her destroy our lives." He pressed a shaking hand to his face. I know, Grace, but I'm done running. I told my lawyers to transfer what's left of my assets into a trust, under your name, for the kids." She blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "Why?" Nathan's lips trembled. "Because I finally realized what matters. And it isn't money. It's the only thing I can do to fix what I broke." Silence stretched between them, heavy but fragile. For a moment, Grace almost saw the man she'd once loved, the one who promised her forever before greed devoured him. Then the knock came at the door. 2 federal agents entered, badges gleaming. "Mr. Miller," one said, "you're under arrest." Nathan didn't resist. He looked at Grace one last time. "Tell Noah and Lila, I'm sorry." As the agents led him away, Grace stood motionless. Outside, the wind howled over the city that had watched their empire burn. She whispered to herself, "Sorry won't bring them back." Still, deep down, she felt something strange, closure. Because for the first time in years, Grace Miller wasn't the victim anymore. She was the survivor standing over the ashes of the man who once thought he owned the world. The courthouse buzzed like a hornet's nest. Reporters filled the corridors, cameras flashing as the most sensational case in Boston's memory reached its final day. The sign on the heavy oak doors read, "The State versus Emily Carter Miller." Grace stood in the hallway, her palms cold, her stomach twisted in knots. Months of silence and waiting had brought her here, to the same room where she had once been humiliated, accused, and broken. But this time, she wasn't the defendant. She was the witness. Beside her, Dr. Samuel Hayes gave a reassuring nod. "Remember, Grace," he whispered, "you don't have to prove you're strong. You already did that. Just tell the truth." Inside, the judge's gavel echoed. Emily sat at the defense table, her once glamorous appearance replaced by sharp edges and hollow eyes. Gone were the designer dresses and practiced smiles. In their place stood a woman who had lost everything and still refused to admit it. Nathan wasn't there. He was already serving his sentence for fraud, stripped of wealth and dignity. His absence hung in the air like a ghost neither sister wanted to acknowledge. The prosecutor began. "Your Honor, today we present final evidence proving that Emily Carter Miller falsified hospital documents, kidnapped a newborn, and conspired to defame her sister, Grace Miller." A collective gasp rippled through the spectators. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her jaw clenched. Her lawyer rose quickly. "Your Honor, my client was suffering from mental instability following childbirth. She was not in control of her actions." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Yet she was stable enough to forge legal contracts, steal medical files, and launder millions under her husband's name." The judge leaned forward. "Proceed." When Grace was called to the stand, the room fell silent. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." As she began to speak, the years of pain unfolded like an open wound. She told them everything, from the night of the gala, to the loss of her children, to Emily's betrayal and the lies that followed. Each word was steady, every tear controlled. By the time she finished, the courtroom was silent except for the faint scratching of pens. Then the prosecutor played the video, the same hospital footage Samuel had recovered. The screen flickered, and there it was again. Emily, disguised in scrubs, cradling the stolen baby. Emily buried her face in her hands. "I didn't mean to hurt her," she sobbed. "I just wanted what she had." Grace closed her eyes. "You didn't want what I had, Emily," she said softly. "You wanted to be me, but you never understood that love isn't something you steal." The judge's gavel struck once, sharp and final. "This court finds Emily Carter Miller guilty on all counts: fraud, kidnapping, and perjury. Sentencing will be immediate." Gasps echoed through the room. Emily broke down, her shoulders shaking as officers moved in. She looked up at Grace one last time, tears streaming. "You win," she whispered. Grace shook her head. "No, Emily, nobody wins here." As Emily was led away, Grace's knees nearly buckled. Samuel caught her arm. "It's over," he murmured. But as Grace looked around the room, the same one where her life had once ended, she realized it wasn't just over. It was reborn. Outside, the press swarmed her for comments, cameras flashing. She held Noah in her arms, sunlight spilling across her face. "What happens now, Mrs. Miller?" a reporter shouted. Grace smiled faintly. "Now," she said, "now I start again." And with that, the woman once buried by betrayal walked out of the courthouse into the light, free, whole, and finally, truly alive. 8 months later, the snow had melted from the streets of Boston. The city was alive again, fresh, green, and breathing. A poster hung outside Symphony Hall, a night of hope, charity gala for women's recovery. At the bottom of the program, one name shone in gold: Grace Miller, director and performer. Inside, the grand hall glimmered under soft light. Guests filled every seat, murmuring with anticipation. Grace stood backstage, smoothing the folds of her elegant silver gown. She felt her heart beating fast, not from fear, but from peace. It had been years since she'd stood before a crowd without shame or sorrow clinging to her. Tonight was different. Tonight was hers. Dr. Samuel Hayes approached, a proud smile touching his face. "You ready?" Grace nodded. "More than ever." "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd see the day you'd be headlining at Symphony Hall instead of sitting in a courtroom." Grace laughed softly. "Neither did I." She turned toward the stage, hearing the applause start to fade. But I guess life's best music comes after the silence. As she stepped into the spotlight, the audience rose to its feet. Cameras flashed. Grace took her place at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. For a long moment, she simply breathed. Then she began to play. The melody was gentle at first, fragile, like memory. It was the same lullaby she'd once sung to Noah when they were hiding in Maine. But now it grew stronger, layered with something triumphant. The room fell utterly still. People wept silently in their seats. In the front row sat Nathan Miller, thin, subdued, released early for good behavior. He had come quietly, avoiding attention. His hands trembled as he watched her, the woman he had broken, now unshakable. When the final note faded, Grace rose. The audience erupted into applause. Cameras captured her smile, the kind that came from surviving, not pretending. After the concert, she found Nathan waiting in the corridor. His voice was low. "You were incredible." She studied him. His once perfect suit was replaced by something modest. His arrogance was gone. "I didn't do it for applause," she said gently. "I did it to remind myself who I am." Nathan nodded slowly. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to have this." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a letter of confession, signed and notarized, detailing every lie, every fraud, every crime he'd hidden to protect Emily. "For the foundation," he said. "Use it to make something better than what we were." Grace stared at him for a long moment, then said softly, "You finally told the truth. Maybe that's the beginning of your redemption." He smiled sadly. "Maybe." As Nathan walked away into the crowd, Grace felt a small hand tug at her dress. Noah stood beside her, clutching his sister Lila's hand. The little girl's curls shone under the hallway lights. "Mommy," Lila said, her voice sleepy, "can we go home now?" Grace knelt, pulling both children close. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." Outside, the city glowed with 1,000 lights. Snow began to fall again, soft and pure. Grace looked up at the sky, then down at the two small faces beside her, the proof that love had survived the ruins. "Do you know why Mommy plays music?" she asked gently. Noah smiled. "Because it makes people feel better." Grace kissed his forehead. "Exactly, even the broken ones." They walked hand in hand down the quiet street, their laughter echoing through the night. And as the curtain closed on her story, Grace Miller, once a ghost, now reborn, left behind not just revenge, but legacy. Proof that no betrayal, no loss, no cruelty could silence a woman who remembered how to rise. Trelivit contentio vuking Aldenoi. So that's how the story ends. Grace's journey wasn't just about revenge or loss. It was about rebuilding, forgiving, and learning to live again. And if you're still here, listening to these final words, then maybe something in her story touched your heart too. Maybe it reminded you of a moment when you felt broken, and somehow you kept going. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is the way. Every pain, every betrayal, every fall, these are not the end. They're the beginning of the person you're meant to become." Grace didn't find healing by winning. She found it by letting go. By realizing that peace isn't something given by others, it's something you build within yourself. So if you've ever been hurt, if you've ever lost something you thought you couldn't live without, remember, you're still here. And that means your story isn't over. If this story spoke to you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope tonight, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we remind each other that even after the darkest nights, the light always returns.